Simulation in Healthcare by Megan Sechrist. HIM 301 Introduction to Health Informatics, SAO 1904A. Dr. Suzanne Payon. Submitted February 25th, 2019. Simulation in Healthcare. The emergence of technology for educational purposes creates a need for faculty and health science educators to understand how to not only operate the technology, but also implement it within the academic and service settings while still using sound academic principles. Nelson R. and Staggers N. 2014, page 454. What is simulation learning? Simulation, a technique, not a technology, to replace or amplify real experiences with guided experiences that evoke or replicate substantial aspects of the real world in a fully interactive manner. GABA 2004. The hallmark of simulation learning is that it enables the study of how the clinical environment responds to its natural state, including the personnel, equipment, and systems responsible for care in that environment. Petrosoniak A. et al. 2018. Ethics within simulation learning. The Society for Simulation in Healthcare formulated the Healthcare Simulationist Code of Ethics, consisting of 6 aspirational values. Those values are integrity, transparency, mutual respect, professionalism, accountability, and results orientation. The remaining details on the Code of Ethics can be found at this website. In addition, at the 2014 International Meeting on Simulation in Healthcare, a debate was held regarding the long-used element of deception as a simulation technique. Some educators have concerns regarding the use of deception to generate a realistic learning experience and its possible negative impact on the participants. According to the authors of the journal entry titled Deception in Simulation Education, Issues, Concepts, and Commentary, quote, these concerns include its effects on self-image of participants as clinicians, their perception of trust in the educational team, and their assumed values regarding truthfulness in medical practice. The example used in the debate was a simulation while an MD, medical doctor, ordered a medication during a cardiac arrest event. The MD orders the incorrect medication, which surpasses the lethal threshold during the event, and this is supposed to prompt the nursing staff to question the provider because this medication could kill the patient. The provider is questioned once, but he pushes back. To pass the simulation, the MD needs to be questioned twice before he or she changes their mind. It's stated that this is supposed to build confidence in the nursing staff and encourage them to speak up to the provider and not be afraid to advocate for their patient. A second similar example is of a defibrillation of a patient. Once again, an MD gives incorrect orders, which is to increase the defibrillator's joules, once again passing the lethal threshold, which can kill the patient. The point of the simulation is to, once again, encourage the staff to speak up to the provider and not be afraid to advocate for their patient. Many argue that these types of deceptive simulations can cause a sense of mistrust between partners, that being medical doctors and nurses, and it could potentially undermine the very teamwork and communication that the simulation was intended to foster. The unexpected challenge can also affect the learner's self-esteem during high-stress situations. Proponents suggested that these ethical concerns can be addressed through debriefing and setting appropriate limits on the extent of the level of deception. They also argue that debriefing can address the emotional responses generated by the high-stress simulation environment. Regulations and standards. The Society for Simulation in Healthcare formulated 7 core accreditation standards. They are as follows. They are as follows. Mission and governance. The program has a clear and publicly stated mission and/or vision statement. Program management. The program has the adequate fiscal resources to support its mission and/or vision. Resource management. The program has the ability to obtain, maintain, and support simulation equipment and the relevant technologies to support the mission and/or vision of the program. Human resources. The program has a directed, qualified individual with appropriate authority of time. Program improvement. The program continually improves the operation of the program through the use of quality management system. Ethics. The program is committed to ethical standards and expanding the field. The program has activities that extend beyond the program, contributing to the body of knowledge in the simulation community. The National Council of State Board of Nursing, NCSBN, has also compiled a set of simulation guidelines for pre-licensure nursing programs. A few examples of these guidelines are as follows. A pre-licensure nursing education program may use simulation as a substitute for traditional clinical experiences, not to exceed 50% of its clinical hours. A program that uses simulation shall adhere to the standards set in this section. A program shall provide evidence to the Board of Nursing that these standards have been met. The program shall have written policies and procedures on the following: short-term and long-term plans for integrating simulation into the curriculum, methods for debriefing, such as simulated activity, and a plan for orienting faculty to the simulation. The remaining set of guidelines can be found at this website. Simulation and its impact on healthcare delivery. Currently, the healthcare system seems to value a science degree, and it leaves most of the clinical training to a hospital orientation or a clinical apprenticeship. According to D.M. Gaba, stated in his article titled "The Future Vision of Simulation Healthcare," quote, "The emphasis on individual knowledge and skill rather than on honing the performance of, the emphasis is on individual knowledge and skill rather than on honing the performance of clinical teams." Basically, the use of simulation enables health professionals to practice necessary skills in an environment that allows for errors without risking patient safety. The use of simulation learning allows students to sharpen their clinical skills without the danger of harming someone during the learning process. Data capture tools and data capture tools and technology. Knowledge discovery and data mining, KDDM technologies, could be used to find the, quote, weak spots within the clinical setting. Finding these areas for improvement can help facilitate hospital educators to develop a simulation in order for clinical teams to improve their skills. For example, an algorithm can be created to monitor the documentation of patient falls based on when they last received an opioid pain medication. If the algorithm picks up on an increased level of falls within a certain time frame of receiving their pain meds, educators could create a simulation for nursing staff on how to thoroughly assess their patient's mobility prior to getting them out of bed. A specific example of how simulation learning affects healthcare. I'm going to pull up a video of a simulation of giving CPR. Within the video, you'll be able to pick up on the communication between the nurses, the use of the devices, and the actual movements of CPR, and going from compressions to breathing to using the defibrillator and back and forth, and basically how this simulation can improve the communication between everyone. And basically, it's a great practice run of how this is going to work in a real-world environment.
My name is Mikella. I'm going to be your nurse today. Miss Jones? Somebody call for a phone. I can't feel a pulse. Okay, I got the G-Send. They're calling a phone. Okay. I got the puck. Here you go. If you're... I'm gonna plug the pads in. You know, if your compressions aren't effective, it looks like you need to get on the bed. Okay. Why don't you try that? Is that helping? Yeah. Okay. Until I find a stool. As soon as I'm done looking at the pads, I'll try to get one. Okay. Alright. Dr. Cart, do we have a...
So you'll pick up that one of the nurse's compressions weren't quite deep enough. So the other nurse was able to pick up on that and say, hey, you should get up on the bed. Your compressions are going to be a lot more effective that way. This is a great way to practice this situation in a learning environment or in a simulation environment, and they can take that with them on the regular floor when this might actually happen.
I just attached the pad, so I'm not quite sure what his initial rhythm is. Alright, there, we're picking up signal. Can you hold compressions and get a rhythm check?
So as you can see, the defibrillator is actually quite a complex process right there. So the use of the simulation learning can really help introduce the nursing staff to the defibrillator, what all of these little buttons are, what the rhythms look like, etc. You know, and having this experience before a real life event is very beneficial because it's really going to decrease the amount of time of the nurse orienting herself to the machine because she already had practice in the simulation environment.
Alright, looks like we have to get back on while we're charging. Alright, go ahead and clear. And shock. Get back on the chest. 1, 2, 3, 4. Get it back, Meredith. 6, 7, 8, 9. Great compressions, Meredith. 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Did the thing come undone?